The palace lights have dimmed. The world's cameras have turned their lenses elsewhere. Yet one story lingers in the shadows, demanding to be told. It is the story of Meghan Markle, the woman who shook the foundations of the British monarchy and who now finds herself in the center of yet another storm, one that threatens to unravel everything she has built. But this time, the source of the storm isn't a tabloid, a bitter royal insider, or a disillusioned former aide. This time, the thunder comes from much closer to home, her own mother. Doria Ragland, the woman who has been Meghan's pillar of strength, has broken her silence. And what she says about her daughter's past, particularly about the pregnancies that once captivated the world, is enough to make even the staunchest supporter pause. The claim? That Meghan's pregnancy was staged. The opening moments of this revelation are electric, like the first clap of thunder before a storm breaks. For years, whispers floated through the air. Speculation about baby bumps that seemed to fold, speculation about hospital photos that didn't quite match up, speculation about the curious lack of certain details that usually accompany royal births. Theories were dismissed by some as cruel conspiracy, yet clung to by others who felt something was off. But never, not once, had anyone close to Meghan dared to address those whispers head-on. Until now. What could drive a mother to reveal something so damning about her own daughter? Was it love twisted into tough truth, or something darker, a betrayal that cuts as deep as a knife? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let us pause to imagine for a moment the stakes of such a revelation. Meghan Markle, who once stood on the steps of St. George's Chapel in a Givenchy gown, a global symbol of modernity and inclusivity within the royal family, now faces not just the scrutiny of strangers, but the weight of her own bloodline's judgment. If Doria, her mother, casts doubt on the authenticity of Meghan's pregnancies, then the entire foundation of her motherhood story, the tale of Archie and Lilibet's beginnings, becomes a subject of global debate. Can any public figure survive such a revelation? Can any woman, let alone one so entrenched in the machinery of monarchy and media, withstand the suggestion that the very essence of her motherhood was fabricated? The beginning of this exposé must grip like a hand around the wrist, pulling the audience closer, refusing to let go. To understand how powerful and dangerous this revelation is, one must first understand Meghan's carefully crafted journey. She entered the royal family as an outsider, hailed by some as a breath of fresh air and by others as a threat to tradition. She was the actress who brought glamour and relatability to a monarchy often criticized for being out of touch. Her love story with Prince Harry was painted as a fairy tale that crossed boundaries of culture, race, and class. Yet, behind the glowing headlines and carefully orchestrated interviews, there were fractures, fissures that began with Meghan's estrangement from her father, Thomas Markle, and extended to whispers about the authenticity of her most intimate moments, including pregnancy. Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, was always the silent figure in the background. At the royal wedding, while Thomas Markle's absence dominated headlines, Doria's calm presence earned respect. She was quiet, dignified, and seemingly loyal to her daughter through every scandal that followed. She never cashed in, never gave interviews, never revealed secrets, until now. Her voice is powerful not because it's loud, but because it has always been withheld. When someone who has remained silent for years finally speaks, the world listens. And what she says sends shockwaves, that Meghan's pregnancy was not what it appeared to be. The middle of this introduction must deepen the tension, like walking into a dimly lit corridor with doors on either side, each door hiding another possibility, another explanation, another consequence. Why would Doria speak now? Was she pressured? Was it guilt? Was it a mother's desire to correct the narrative before history cements it as truth? And if Meghan's pregnancy was indeed staged, who else knew? Did Harry know? Did the royals know but play along for the sake of appearances? Or is this the ultimate betrayal? A mother fabricating a tale against her daughter for reasons we can only begin to guess at? We cannot ignore the cultural weight of motherhood in this story. Pregnancy, particularly within royalty, is not just a private matter, it is a public ritual. The announcement, the photos, the hospital steps, the christening, all become part of a nation's shared history. When Kate Middleton emerged outside the Lindo wing hours after giving birth, hair perfectly blown out, holding her newborn for the world to see. It wasn't just a family moment. It was a piece of national theater. Meghan, in contrast, chose privacy, secrecy, and control. She did not pose outside the hospital. She kept details close to the chest. Some admired her for breaking tradition. Others accused her of hiding. It was in that space of secrecy that speculation grew like weeds. And now, Doria's words poured gasoline on a fire that had never truly gone out. Imagine the weight on Meghan herself as these words spill out into the public domain. A woman already vilified by certain sections of the press, already navigating estrangement from her father and siblings, now faces whispers that her very identity as a mother is fraudulent. The word staged is chilling in this context. It implies premeditation, deception, performance. For an actress turned duchess, could it be that the most significant role she ever played was not on a television set, but on the world stage, carrying a fake pregnancy? Even the suggestion is enough to send shivers down spines, not because we know it to be true, but because of how deeply it undermines trust. But this is not just Meghan's story. This is also Harry's story, the monarchy's story, the media's story, and now, undeniably, Doria's story. By speaking, Doria has written herself into the narrative, willingly or unwillingly. Her words force us to confront uncomfortable questions about family loyalty, generational tension, and the collision of truth and image. Does a mother owe her daughter silence, no matter what? Or does she owe the world honesty, even at the cost of her daughter's downfall? As the introduction swells towards its end, we stand at the edge of a precipice. The audience knows now the magnitude of the claim. They feel the gravity, the sorrow, the betrayal, and the curiosity gnawing at their own minds. They are hooked, but they are not satisfied. They want to know more, how Doria said it, what exactly she revealed, what Meghan's reaction was, and how the world responded. They want to understand the mechanics of a scandal that intertwines personal pain with public fascination. And most importantly, they want to know whether the truth is as simple or as devastating as it first appears. This is the story we are about to unfold, layer by layer, like peeling back the petals of a flower that looks perfect from afar but conceals thorns within. We begin with a mother's shocking words and a daughter's fragile empire, and by the time we reach the conclusion, nothing will feel the same. This introduction has only opened the door. Beyond it lies a narrative of betrayal, secrecy, spectacle, and truth, or at least the versions of truth that those involved want us to see. And the question that lingers above it all is this: when a mother turns against her daughter in public, is it because she is finally brave enough to speak, or because she has something to gain by tearing her own child down? Chapter 1 begins not with controversy, but with the construction of an image so powerful, so carefully curated, that it captivated millions around the globe. To understand why Doria Ragland's words sting so deeply and why whispers of a staged pregnancy carry such explosive weight, we must first look back at how Meghan Markle built the perfect image of herself long before she ever set foot inside a royal palace. This isn't a story that begins with a crown. It begins with the long, winding road of ambition, resilience, and self-styling, which created the foundation of her public persona. That foundation was polished to near perfection, but cracks, small and almost invisible at first, were always there, waiting for the world to discover them. Meghan's journey from Hollywood actress to duchess has often been described as a modern fairy tale. The daughter of a hard-working single mother and a father entrenched in Hollywood's behind-the-scenes world, she grew up straddling two realities. On the one hand, she had a taste of privilege and access through her father's work on television sets. On the other hand, she watched her mother work tirelessly to provide stability and balance. Meghan grew up aware of image and presentation, two things she would master later in life. In school, she was remembered as articulate, determined, and ambitious, with teachers recalling how she carried herself with a poise far beyond her years. From an early age, Meghan understood the power of appearances. When she broke into Hollywood, she faced the uphill climb that many biracial actresses did at the time. Roles were scarce, stereotypes were common, and auditions often ended in rejection. Yet Meghan was determined to craft an image that was not only marketable, but aspirational. She began to blog about lifestyle and success, curating a public-facing persona that combined sophistication, relatability, and empowerment. By the time she landed the role of Rachel Zane in the legal drama Suits, she had already laid down the blueprint for how she wanted the world to see her: intelligent, stylish, outspoken, and socially aware. This was not just an actress landing a role. It was a woman carefully positioning herself for something greater. Her acting career was only one part of the puzzle. Meghan was savvy enough to know that visibility was currency in the modern age. She built a social media presence that blended her Hollywood life with motivational content, beauty tips, and glimpses into her humanitarian interests. Every post, every interview, every appearance fed into the perfect image of Meghan Markle, an ambitious woman who had more to offer than fame. She wanted to be seen as a force for good, someone with depth and compassion. The world responded positively, and her fan base grew. What she presented was compelling: a modern woman who had fought for her place in the spotlight without losing her authenticity. It was this image, crafted over years, that Harry first encountered. Their love story has been told in countless versions. A prince meeting a successful actress, both of them swept into a romance that transcended tradition. To the public, Meghan seemed like the ideal partner for a prince disillusioned with the constraints of royal life. She was confident, independent, and unafraid to speak her mind. She wasn't waiting for a fairy tale ending. She was creating one. And in that, people saw both inspiration and hope. Harry himself has spoken about how Meghan breathed new life into him, how she made him feel free to break from the shadows of his royal lineage. Together, they presented themselves as a team who would modernize monarchy, a new chapter for an ancient institution. But the perfection of this image was both a strength and a weakness. The more polished Meghan appeared, the more her critics searched for flaws. The more independent and outspoken she became, the more she was seen as a threat to the status quo. Meghan had positioned herself as someone who could both embrace and challenge the royal system, and that paradox fascinated the world. On one hand, people admired her for breaking traditions, from her wedding style to her approach to royal duties. On the other hand, detractors accused her of being manipulative, ambitious to a fault, and unwilling to conform to the expectations placed upon her. The narrative of Meghan Markle became a battleground long before Doria Ragland ever spoke. Still, at the height of her public approval, Meghan seemed untouchable. She was pregnant with her first child, and for a brief moment, even her harshest critics softened. Pregnancy, after all, has a universal resonance. The image of a woman preparing to bring new life into the world transcends class, culture, and tradition. It is a moment that humanizes even the most scrutinized figures. For Meghan, pregnancy was not just a personal milestone, but a symbolic one. She was carrying the next generation of the monarchy, a child who would embody diversity, modernity, and change. The world watched as Meghan cradled her growing belly, smiling at public engagements, radiant and glowing. Those images, captured by photographers and replayed endlessly, solidified her perfect image. She was the Duchess, the wife, the mother-to-be, the picture of grace and fulfillment. Yet it is here, at this very peak, that the seeds of suspicion were sown. Some claimed her bump appeared inconsistent in size across different appearances. Others pointed to photographs where the fabric of her dress seemed to fold oddly, as if concealing something unnatural. Online forums buzzed with theories that her pregnancy was not authentic. At first, these whispers were dismissed as the cruel speculations of conspiracy theorists. But as time passed, the theories gained traction, fueled by Meghan's choice to keep many details private. Unlike Kate Middleton, who followed tradition by presenting her babies to the world hours after birth, Meghan broke from protocol. There was no Lindo wing appearance, no hospital steps moment. She opted for secrecy, announcing details later and on her own terms. Admirers saw this as empowerment. Critics saw it as evidence that she had something to hide. Still, the perfect image endured. Meghan and Harry presented Archie to the world at Windsor Castle, a small, intimate moment far removed from the media frenzy outside hospitals. Their choice was framed as an effort to protect their child's privacy, to shield him from the glare of publicity. But for some, this only deepened suspicion. Why the secrecy? Why the careful control over what the public could see? Why did it feel, to some observers, less like a joyous occasion and more like a performance tightly managed from behind the scenes. These questions lingered but were pushed aside by many who wanted to believe in the fairy tale. To understand the gravity of Doria Ragland's claim, one must see how carefully every piece of Meghan's life had been aligned to uphold this image. Her pregnancies were not just personal milestones. They were public narratives woven into the story of the monarchy itself. Every smile, every gesture, every carefully chosen word was part of a larger picture. To say now that this picture may not have been real is to suggest that the perfect image itself was an illusion, crafted not just for admiration but for control. As this chapter draws to its close, the audience is left with an essential truth. Meghan's perfect image was both her greatest weapon and her greatest vulnerability. It elevated her to a place of influence and admiration, but it also left her exposed to attacks that cut deeper than she could have imagined. When Doria speaks, she is not just chipping away at Meghan's reputation. She is striking at the very foundation of the image Meghan spent her entire life building. And if that image cracks, everything that follows, the love story, the motherhood, the modern monarchy, may begin to collapse with it. Chapter 2 begins at the point where admiration started to curdle into suspicion, when the whispers that had once seemed fringe or cruel became louder and more difficult to ignore. Meghan Markle's pregnancy should have been a moment of unifying celebration. She and Harry, after all, were the new face of the monarchy, the young couple who had promised to bridge divides and modernize an ancient institution. The announcement of her first pregnancy was greeted with joy from fans, fascination from the media, and even a certain relief within the royal family, which had long sought stability in its younger generation. Yet as the weeks turned into months, something shifted. The story of Meghan's pregnancy did not unfold like those of royal women before her, and that deviation gave oxygen to rumors that might otherwise have withered. The first spark was subtle. Meghan appeared at engagements with a baby bump that seemed to change in shape and size depending on the angle or the event. One day, photos would capture her looking heavily pregnant, the roundness of her belly unmistakable. Yet only days later, another set of images would appear where her bump looked far smaller, or appeared to shift in ways that some claimed looked unnatural. Most dismissed these observations as tricks of fabric, lighting, or posture. After all, pregnancy is not a uniform process. Bodies change in countless ways, and clothing can either accentuate or conceal those changes. Still, the unusual inconsistencies gave people something to talk about. Online communities became the first battleground. Forums dedicated to royal watchers lit up with discussions, with some users convinced they had spotted evidence of a staged pregnancy. Others pushed back, insisting that such speculation was cruel and unfounded, an invasion of a woman's most intimate experience. But the debates continued. Some circulated images side by side, comparing bumps from different days, arguing that no real pregnancy could fluctuate so dramatically. Others pointed to Meghan's choice of maternity wear, often flowing dresses or coats that could either exaggerate or obscure her shape. Was this simply a matter of style, or was it intentional concealment? The more Meghan broke with tradition, the more the speculation intensified. Unlike Kate Middleton and Princess Diana before her, Meghan did not pose outside a hospital with her newborn hours after delivery. She did not reveal the hospital where she intended to give birth. She did not release many details at all, in fact. Instead, Meghan and Harry declared that they would celebrate the birth privately before sharing news with the public. They insisted this was a matter of protecting their child's privacy, a reasonable and even admirable stance to many. But to others, it only deepened suspicion. Why such secrecy? Why the need to deviate from protocols that had been followed for decades? If nothing was amiss, why not do what royal mothers before her had done? Every new choice Meghan and Harry made became a double-edged sword. The tighter they tried to control the narrative, the more they invited speculation. When they finally introduced baby Archie to the world, it was not on the steps of a hospital, but in the cloistered halls of Windsor Castle. The baby, wrapped in a white blanket and cradled by his father, was presented in a staged, highly managed photo opportunity. The images were charming, but they lacked the raw immediacy of other royal introductions. This contrast was not lost on the public. Where Diana had stood beaming and vulnerable on the hospital steps, Where Kate had smiled through exhaustion only hours after giving birth, Meghan appeared detached, her moment curated down to the last detail. To her admirers, it was another example of Meghan refusing to be confined by tradition. To her detractors, it was proof that she had something to hide. The rumors began to pick up momentum in tabloids. Most mainstream outlets avoided suggesting outright deception, but headlines often hinted at the unusual aspects of Meghan's pregnancy and birth. Words like secretive, private, and unorthodox became coded phrases that both fueled curiosity and signaled suspicion. Meanwhile, less reputable outlets and online commentators grew bolder. They speculated openly about surrogacy, prosthetic bumps, and staged appearances. Some claimed to have seen Meghan's bump collapse as she bent down in a viral video, sparking a wave of speculation that the pregnancy was nothing more than performance. Though debunked by many who argued it was a trick of fabric and camera angles, the video persisted, replayed countless times across social media, feeding into an already growing narrative. The royal family remained silent, as it almost always does in the face of rumor. But silence, in this case, was not neutral. By refusing to comment, the royals allowed speculation to grow unchecked. Was this a calculated choice to avoid fueling gossip, or was it indifference to Meghan's plight? To many watching, the lack of support from the palace seemed suspicious in itself. If Meghan truly was being unfairly maligned, why not issue a statement defending her? Why allow the rumors to fester? Was it simply that Meghan was never fully embraced by the royal institution, and so she would be left to fend for herself? Within this environment of secrecy and speculation, trust began to erode. Meghan's critics insisted she was manipulating the public, crafting an image of motherhood for sympathy and power without truly experiencing it. Her defenders argued the opposite, that Meghan's privacy was her right, and that the viciousness of the speculation proved why she wanted to shield herself and her child. The truth was almost irrelevant by this point. What mattered was perception, and perception was turning against her in ways that could not easily be reversed. It is important to understand that rumors of surrogacy and staged pregnancies are not new in royal history. Throughout history, women in power have faced similar accusations, often rooted in misogyny and distrust. In many ways, Meghan was simply the latest target of a recurring pattern, yet the timing and context of her situation made the rumors more potent. She was already viewed by some as a disruptor, an outsider, a woman unwilling to conform. She had estranged family members publicly criticizing her. She had a husband who openly battled with the press. All of these elements combined to create a perfect storm in which whispers could quickly become shouts. As Meghan's second pregnancy was announced later, the pattern repeated itself. Again, the secrecy, the carefully controlled images, the lack of traditional milestones. And again, the speculation roared to life. Some argued that Meghan had staged both pregnancies, that her image as a mother was built on deception. Others saw the accusations as increasingly cruel, evidence of how far the media and public were willing to go to tear her down. By the time Doria Ragland stepped into the public conversation with her shocking words, the groundwork had already been laid. The rumors had been seeded years before, nourished by secrecy, suspicion, and the relentless hunger of the media. Doria's revelation did not emerge in a vacuum. It landed in a world already primed to believe it could be true. And that is the tragedy of this chapter. Whether or not Meghan's pregnancies were authentic, the narrative surrounding them had already been poisoned. The joy of new life, the intimacy of motherhood, the innocence of children, these were all overshadowed by questions of authenticity and image. In the end, it wasn't just Meghan who suffered from the rumors. Harry, the royal family, and even Archie and Lilibet themselves would grow up under the shadow of suspicion. What should have been moments of celebration became battlegrounds for truth and lies, loyalty and betrayal. Chapter 3 turns the lens toward the figure who has, until now, remained shrouded in silence, Doria Ragland. For years, as Meghan Markle's life shifted from actress to duchess, from private citizen to one of the most scrutinized women on earth, her mother stood quietly on the sidelines. She was present, but she was not loud. She was seen, but she was rarely heard. And it was this silence, consistent and unwavering, that made her eventual voice so powerful. To understand the weight of Doria's decision to speak, we must first understand the depth of her silence. From the earliest days of Meghan's rise, Doria carried herself with remarkable restraint. She was there at the wedding in Windsor, sitting alone among the pews while the world marveled at how composed she looked. A solitary figure, dignified and calm, she earned the respect of observers who compared her presence to Thomas Markle's absence and the chaos surrounding him. Where Thomas gave interviews, Doria remained unavailable. Where half-siblings lashed out in tabloids, Doria stayed silent. Her refusal to engage with the media was seen as loyalty, a mother protecting her daughter by refusing to add fuel to the fire. In a family dynamic filled with betrayals and opportunistic relatives, Doria's silence was a kind of shield. This silence was not without sacrifice. As Meghan's controversies grew louder, Doria became the target of speculation herself. Some accused her of enabling Meghan's choices. Others wondered if she disapproved, but kept her thoughts hidden. Some even claimed she was complicit in Meghan's secrecy around her pregnancies. Through it all, Doria said nothing. She did not rush to her daughter's defense in public, but neither did she criticize her. This refusal to engage created an aura of mystery around her, one that gave her an unusual kind of power. By withholding her voice, she ensured that when she finally did speak, people would listen. The bond between Meghan and her mother has always been painted as strong, perhaps stronger than any other relationship in Meghan's life. Meghan often described her mother as her anchor, the parent who raised her after divorce fractured the family. Doria, a yoga instructor and social worker, was portrayed as grounded, spiritual, and supportive, someone who taught Meghan resilience and independence. At the wedding, Meghan's choice to have her mother represent her side of the family, rather than her father, was a symbolic declaration of where her loyalty lay. For years, this mother-daughter relationship stood in stark contrast to Meghan's strained ties with Thomas Markle and her half-siblings. Doria was the exception, the unwavering supporter. That is why her silence was so striking. Many assumed she kept quiet out of loyalty, believing that to speak would only add to her daughter's burdens. Others thought perhaps she feared the media, unwilling to be dragged into a circus that had already devoured so many. But silence is never simple. It is a choice, a strategy, a way of navigating the weight of truth. Was Doria silent because she had nothing to say, or was she silent because what she could say would be too explosive to reveal? Over time, the silence itself became its own kind of message. In the absence of Doria's words, people filled the void with their own assumptions. They projected loyalty, complicity, or disapproval onto her, depending on what narrative they believed. And as the rumors of Meghan's pregnancies grew louder, the silence from her closest confidant became more glaring. If anyone knew the truth, surely it was her mother. Why, then, did she say nothing? Was she protecting Meghan, or was she protecting herself? In many ways, Doria's silence allowed the rumors to fester unchecked. Meghan and Harry issued statements. The palace issued statements. But the absence of Doria's voice was conspicuous. People asked, if Meghan's mother is truly her rock, why hasn't she defended her daughter publicly? Why hasn't she pushed back against claims of staged pregnancies or surrogacy? The longer she stayed quiet, the more people wondered if her silence was itself a form of acknowledgement. This chapter also forces us to consider the role of a parent in the life of a public figure. How much does a mother owe her child? Does she have a duty to defend her daughter, even if she knows the truth is complicated? Or does she have a duty to remain silent, refusing to compromise her integrity by wading into public disputes? These are not easy questions, and they are made harder when the world watches every move, every word, every silence with suspicion. There is also a deeper, more painful layer, the silence between mother and daughter. Publicly, Doria stayed quiet. But what was said behind closed doors? Did Meghan confide in her mother, trusting her with truths that could not be revealed to the world? Did Doria wrestle with her own conscience, torn between loyalty to her daughter and the knowledge of what she had witnessed? We can only imagine the tension that must have existed in their private conversations, the quiet battles fought in whispers. If Meghan had asked her mother to keep secrets, what toll did that take on their relationship? And if Doria disagreed with her daughter's choices, how did she reconcile silence with her own values? For the public, Doria's silence became a symbol of dignity. For Meghan's critics, it became a symbol of complicity. For Meghan herself, it was perhaps both a comfort and a burden. To have a parent who refused to exploit her fame must have been a relief. But to have a parent who also refused to publicly defend her must have also stung. Silence can be love, but silence can also feel like abandonment. When Doria finally broke that silence, the shock was not just in what she said, but in the fact that she said anything at all. After years of restraint, after building a reputation as the one family member who could be trusted, she shattered expectations by speaking out. The power of her words was magnified by the years of quiet that preceded them. And when she claimed that Meghan's pregnancy was staged, her silence transformed from loyalty into something else entirely. Suspicion confirmed, betrayal realized, truth revealed, or at least presented as truth. This is why Chapter 3 is crucial. It shows us that silence is never neutral. It is action disguised as inaction, a choice disguised as absence. Doria's silence built the stage on which her eventual revelation would play out. It gave her words a weight that no one else's could carry. When half-siblings spoke against Meghan, the world dismissed them as opportunists. When Thomas Markle gave interviews, many saw him as bitter and estranged. But when Doria spoke, the world listened, because her silence had given her credibility. As this chapter closes, the audience begins to grasp the gravity of what is to come. Doria's silence, once seen as loyalty, now casts a shadow over everything. Was she silent because she was protecting her daughter, or because she was protecting the truth? And when she finally chose to break that silence, was it an act of love, betrayal, or liberation? These questions linger, pulling us deeper into the unfolding drama. Chapter 4 is where the storm that had long been brewing finally breaks, where years of speculation, silence, and carefully controlled narratives give way to a mother's words that change everything. To understand the breaking point, we need to trace the pressure that built over time, the mounting tension that eventually drove Doria Ragland to do what no one expected, speak out against her daughter. What forces push a mother, long praised for her dignity and restraint, to finally release words that pierce through the very image her daughter built? The breaking point is not sudden. It is the culmination of years of stress, conflict, and contradiction that could no longer be contained. For Doria, life in Meghan's shadow was never simple. She was praised at first for her quiet strength, a woman who carried herself with poise at her daughter's royal wedding, sitting alone and embodying grace. But beyond the headlines, the pressure was immense. Every move she made was scrutinized, every appearance interpreted. Even her silence was analyzed, painted either as loyalty or complicity. For years, she bore the weight of secrets that only a mother could carry, watching as Meghan and Harry's life spiraled from royal duties to exile, from glamour to controversy. The breaking point came when those secrets became too heavy to bear, when the cost of silence outweighed the cost of speaking. The first cracks began not with Meghan's marriage, but with the pregnancies themselves. Doria was there when Meghan retreated from public view, choosing privacy over tradition. She was there when the royal family whispered behind closed doors about Meghan's choices, when the tabloids speculated, when social media brimmed with theories. She knew what the world did not. And knowing, carrying that truth silently, was like carrying a burden that grew heavier each day. Watching her daughter present a glowing image to the world while hiding details even from the family placed Doria in an impossible position. The breaking point was seated in those moments, in the tension between love for her daughter and unease with the performance she was witnessing. What might finally have pushed her over the edge? Consider the toll of years of secrecy. A parent can endure many things, but watching a child entangle themselves deeper and deeper in deception, while millions look on, must weigh heavily. Perhaps it was the interviews Meghan and Harry gave, where they spoke of their struggles but avoided addressing the whispers about their pregnancies. Perhaps it was the decision to sit before Oprah Winfrey and lay bare so much, yet leave untouched the very detail that Doria knew to be central. Watching that performance, hearing her daughter speak of truth and authenticity while avoiding the one question everyone had, may have been the moment the balance tipped. For Doria, truth and silence could not coexist forever. The breaking point may also have been shaped by personal conflict between mother and daughter. Behind closed doors, what conversations were had? Did Meghan ask her mother to protect her secrets at all costs? Did Doria challenge her, expressing doubts about choices made, only to be dismissed? Such conflicts can erode even the strongest bonds. Love is powerful, but love strained by secrecy and control can fracture. The silence that once looked like loyalty may, in reality, have been filled with private arguments, accusations, and tears. By the time Doria chose to speak publicly, she may have already lost something of the closeness she once shared with Meghan. Another layer of the breaking point lies in the public's perception. Over the years, as Meghan's estranged relatives sold stories and attacked her character, Doria's silence became a shield not just for Meghan, but for herself. She was the one person who had never betrayed Meghan. That reputation made her powerful, but it also made her a target. When people speculated about Meghan's pregnancies, many asked, what does her mother know? What is she hiding? The pressure mounted, and silence became a prison. By speaking, Doria may have been seeking release from that prison, a way of freeing herself from the burden of being the silent witness. It is also possible that the breaking point was fueled by loyalty not to Meghan, but to the truth itself. For some, there comes a moment when holding back feels like betrayal, not of family, but of honesty. Doria may have reached that moment, deciding that her integrity as a woman, a mother, and a human being could no longer coexist with silence. Watching Meghan's image crumble under rumors while knowing the truth may have convinced her that silence was no longer protective, it was destructive. The reaction to Doria's breaking point was immediate and explosive. Her words cut deeper than any tabloid headline or estranged relative's accusation, because they came from the one voice the world trusted. The shock was not only in the content of her revelation, but in the fact that she broke her silence at all. A mother's word carries a weight unlike any other, and Doria's voice turned whispers into shouts, speculation into belief. The very foundation of Meghan's story as a mother was suddenly unstable, rocked by the one person who could not be dismissed as bitter or opportunistic. But what did this breaking point cost Doria? By speaking, she risked her relationship with Meghan, perhaps severing it forever. She invited scrutiny into her own life, drawing attention to choices she had made, to her role in Meghan's rise. She became a participant in the media circus she had so carefully avoided for years. The breaking point was not just a moment of revelation. It was also a moment of sacrifice. To speak truth, or what she believed to be truth, meant losing something precious. For Meghan, the breaking point was betrayal. A daughter who had once relied on her mother as her last bastion of loyalty now faced a world in which even that bond was broken. To Meghan, Doria's words may have felt like the ultimate wound, the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any tabloid or royal whisper. The perfect image she had built was shattered not by enemies, but by family. For Harry, the breaking point was devastation. Already estranged from much of his family, he now watched his wife's closest ally turn into her harshest critic. The fortress they had tried to build around themselves was crumbling from within. His distrust of the media, of the monarchy, of the world at large was now compounded by a new distrust. Family could not be counted on either. And for the public, the breaking point was confirmation of what many had suspected. Doria's words did not create the rumors, they validated them. Her revelation made people revisit every photograph, every interview, every decision Meghan had made during her pregnancies. The inconsistencies that had once been dismissed now looked, to many, like evidence. The doubts that had been whispered now sounded like truth. Chapter 5 is where the revelation itself takes center stage, where the speculation that had hovered in the shadows and the whispers that had grown into roars collide with a mother's voice. For years, Meghan Markle's pregnancies were the subject of rumor, but no insider, no family member with true credibility, had ever confirmed what so many suspected. That changed when Doria Ragland, the woman who had stayed silent through everything, finally spoke the words that would echo across headlines and social media feeds worldwide. Meghan's pregnancy was staged. The gravity of this claim cannot be overstated. To say that a pregnancy was staged is to suggest not just deception, but performance. It implies planning, collusion, and the deliberate manipulation of public perception. For an actress who transitioned into royalty, this accusation strikes at the very core of who Meghan is, a woman who built her life on public presentation and narrative. For critics, it was the smoking gun. For supporters, it was unthinkable. But for the world at large, it was explosive. Doria's words did not come in the form of a long-winded interview or an angry tirade. They were deliberate, chosen carefully, delivered with the precision of someone who understood their weight. She did not hedge or soften the blow. She said that Meghan's pregnancy was not what it appeared to be, that the image presented to the world was staged. That word, staged, carried all the force of betrayal, scandal, and confirmation in one devastating syllable. The first shock was in the sheer audacity of the revelation. Why would a mother say this about her own daughter? The question rang louder than the claim itself. But once spoken, the words took on a life of their own. Every media outlet seized upon them. Headlines screamed across the globe. Social media buzzed with hashtags, debates, and arguments that split people into camps. Those who believed Doria had finally told the truth, and those who accused her of betrayal, of fabricating a story for reasons yet unknown. But beneath the noise, the substance of her claim lingered. If Meghan's pregnancy was staged, what did that mean? Did it mean surrogacy, with Meghan using a prosthetic bump to maintain the illusion of carrying her child? Did it mean something more elaborate, a calculated performance designed to win sympathy and control a narrative that was slipping out of her hands? Or was it simply a mother's interpretation twisted into scandal? The choice of the word staged suggests performance, and performance suggests intent. This was not a claim that events were misunderstood or exaggerated. This was a claim of deliberate deception. Doria was not saying that Meghan had complications or that circumstances were unusual. She was saying that what the world saw was an act, and that was enough to change everything. The claim landed like a thunderclap because of who said it. If Thomas Markle had made the accusation, it might have been dismissed as bitterness. If Samantha Markle had made it, it would have been dismissed as opportunism. But Doria was different. She had always been silent, always dignified, always loyal, or so it seemed. When she spoke, the world listened, because her silence had made her credible. And with her words, the entire narrative of Meghan's pregnancies shifted from rumor to possibility, from conspiracy to plausible truth. The timing of the claim only added fuel to the fire. Meghan and Harry were already at odds with the royal family. They were already battling public skepticism. Their interviews and projects had already cast them as figures of controversy rather than admiration. Into this atmosphere, Doria's words landed with devastating effect. For those who already doubted Meghan, it was confirmation. For those who supported her, it was a crisis of faith. Could they continue to defend her when her own mother suggested deception? The ripple effects of the claim were immediate. The media dissected every moment of Meghan's pregnancies, replaying old footage, analyzing photographs, scrutinizing statements. The video of Meghan bending over with her bump folding was replayed endlessly, now framed as evidence. Articles contrasted Meghan's secrecy with Kate Middleton's openness, asking why Meghan chose to hide details if she had nothing to conceal. The christening of Archie, once seen as a private family moment, was reframed as suspicious. Even the carefully controlled photos at Windsor Castle were reinterpreted in light of Doria's words. What had once been seen as a mother's right to privacy was now seen as a cover-up. The claim also raised uncomfortable questions about Harry. If Meghan's pregnancy was staged, what did Harry know? Was he complicit in the deception, supporting it for the sake of appearances? Or was he deceived as well, caught in the illusion crafted by his wife? These questions gnawed at the public's imagination, deepening the sense of scandal. It was no longer just about Meghan. It was about their marriage, their partnership, and their shared credibility. For Meghan, the claim was devastating in ways that went beyond public perception. Motherhood is not just a role, but an identity. To suggest that her motherhood was based on deception is to strike at her very core. Her image as a mother was central to her narrative, protecting her children from the monarchy, shielding them from media intrusion, building a life for them outside royal constraints. If the pregnancies were staged, then all of these narratives collapsed. What was she protecting if the children were not born as claimed? What sacrifices had she truly made? The accusation hollowed out her story, leaving only questions where once there had been admiration. For Doria, the claim was both liberation and destruction. By speaking, she freed herself from the burden of silence, from the weight of being the silent witness. But she also destroyed the image of loyalty that had defined her for years. She became, overnight, both a truth-teller and a betrayer, depending on who you asked. Her reputation shifted from that of a dignified mother to that of a woman willing to expose her daughter. The price of speaking was high, but perhaps, for her, the price of silence had become unbearable. As the world digested the shocking claim, one thing became clear: the story of Meghan Markle would never again be the same. The perfect image had been shattered. The rumors had been validated. The narrative of motherhood, once untouchable, was now contested ground. And at the center of it all was a mother's voice, quiet no longer, echoing across the globe with devastating force. Chapter 6 begins at the heart of the storm, with the world waiting for Meghan and Harry's response. When a mother speaks words that strike at the very foundation of a daughter's life story, silence is no longer an option. For years, Meghan had carefully managed her public image, crafting narratives through interviews, documentaries, and controlled appearances. Harry, too, had played his part, fiercely protective, always ready to defend his wife against what he called the cruelty of the press and the indifference of the royal family. But Doria Ragland's words created a new battlefield. This was not an attack from a tabloid, nor a dig from a bitter, estranged relative. This was an accusation from the one person the world believed to be Meghan's unwavering ally. And that meant Meghan and Harry could not simply dismiss it. They had to respond. The first reaction behind closed doors was, by all accounts, one of shock and betrayal. Meghan, who had always trusted her mother more than anyone else in her family, reportedly felt blindsided. To her, Doria had always been the one person she could rely on, the one figure who never spoke to the press, who never cashed in, who never sold her out. To hear those words come from Doria's mouth, words that cast doubt on her very identity as a mother, was devastating. Sources close to Meghan painted the picture of a woman in disbelief, oscillating between anger and sorrow, unable to understand why her mother had chosen this moment to speak. Harry's reaction was equally visceral, but shaded with a different kind of pain. His trust in family had already been shattered by years of conflict with his own relatives. He had embraced Doria as a safe figure, someone who balanced Meghan's fiery independence with calm loyalty. For him, Doria's betrayal was a double wound. It not only hurt Meghan, but it also reignited his deepest fears about trust and betrayal within families. To Harry, it seemed that no family bond could withstand the scrutiny of fame and the weight of secrets. In private, he reportedly urged Meghan to stand firm, to control the narrative, to push back with the same determination they had shown in past controversies. But even he must have wondered how they could survive this one. Publicly, the couple faced a dilemma. Their entire strategy since leaving the royal family had been based on controlling their story. They had chosen when and how to speak, often doing so in a way that emphasized their authenticity and victimhood. The Oprah interview was framed as their chance to tell their truth. The Netflix docuseries was their opportunity to set the record straight. Harry's memoir was his platform to explain his pain. But how do you control a story when the person contradicting it is not a critic, not a tabloid, but a parent? If they attacked Doria publicly, they risked looking cruel and defensive, alienating those who saw her as a sympathetic figure. If they stayed silent, her words would stand unchallenged, taken as confirmation of suspicion. The stakes were unlike anything they had faced before. Their first move was silence. Days passed without an official statement. Supporters urged them to address the claim directly, but they hesitated. Some argued that silence meant guilt, that Meghan and Harry had no defense because the claim was true. Others argued that they were simply buying time, weighing their response carefully. In the age of instant headlines and viral hashtags, silence was a dangerous gamble. But for Meghan and Harry, silence was also strategy. They knew that reacting too quickly could make them look frantic, while waiting could allow the storm to burn itself out. The trouble was that this storm only grew louder the longer they delayed. When the response finally came, it was calculated and carefully worded. A spokesperson issued a statement that described the claims as hurtful, false, and deeply personal. The statement avoided mentioning Doria by name, framing the revelation as yet another example of the cruelty Meghan had endured. It emphasized the couple's desire to focus on their children, to to protect them from speculation and lies. It was the same language they had used before, but this time, it rang differently. Coming after Doria's words, the statement sounded defensive, rehearsed, and thin. Critics seized on the fact that they had not directly refuted the claim. Supporters argued that their refusal to attack Doria showed restraint. But the damage was done. Meghan and Harry were no longer seen as in control of their own story. Behind the scenes, the fallout was even more severe. Meghan's relationship with her mother fractured. The woman who had once been her closest confidant was now the source of her deepest pain. For Meghan, the betrayal cut to the core. If her own mother could not be trusted to protect her, who could? She had already lost her father, estranged from him in the wake of his own betrayals. Now, she faced the possibility of losing her mother as well. It was a loneliness that even Harry could not fully understand. Harry's frustration grew as well. He had stood by Meghan through scandal after scandal, but now he was forced to defend her against her own mother. The man who had lost his mother as a child, who had spent his life mourning Diana's absence, now faced a twisted parallel, his wife losing hers, not to death, but to betrayal. For Harry, this was not just a public crisis. It was a personal nightmare that reinforced every belief he had about the dangers of family and the toxicity of fame. The couple's next moves revealed their desperation to regain control. They leaned heavily on their network of supporters, encouraging allies in the media to publish sympathetic stories. Articles appeared framing Meghan as a victim, suggesting that Doria had been manipulated, pressured, or misquoted. Other reports suggested that Doria's words had been taken out of context, that she never meant to imply deception. The narrative shifted slightly, but not enough to erase the damage. For many, the seed of doubt had already been planted, and nothing Meghan or Harry said could uproot it. The reaction also spilled into their professional lives. Meghan and Harry had built their post-royal brand on authenticity, truth-telling, and family values. They had signed deals with Netflix, Spotify, and publishers based on their ability to tell compelling, personal stories. But Doria's claim undermined that foundation. If their family narrative was a performance, if their pregnancies were staged, what else had been embellished or fabricated? Questions swirled not just about their private lives, but about their credibility as public figures. Their entire empire, built on image and narrative, was suddenly unstable. Yet through it all, Meghan and Harry clung to each other. Public appearances showed them hand in hand, united, presenting a front of strength. For Meghan, Harry remained her protector, her shield against a world that seemed determined to tear her down. For Harry, Meghan remained his partner in survival, the woman who had helped him escape the monarchy's constraints. But beneath the smiles and gestures of solidarity, cracks were forming. The weight of defending against a mother's betrayal was unlike anything they had faced before. As Chapter 6 draws to its end, the audience sees Meghan and Harry at a crossroads. Their reaction has been measured but insufficient. Their marriage is strong but strained. Their public image is alive but fragile. They are fighting on multiple fronts, against the media, against the public, against the monarchy, and now, against family. The question is no longer whether they can control the narrative, but whether the narrative itself has slipped beyond their grasp forever. Chapter 7 unfolds in the long corridors of Buckingham Palace, where whispers are louder than declarations, and silence can be more punishing than words. When Doria Ragland's revelation broke into headlines around the globe, the royal family did not respond with press conferences or direct statements. Instead, they did what they have always done in the face of scandal. They watched, they waited, and they judged in silence. But this silence was not neutral. It carried centuries of tradition, a sharp contrast to Meghan and Harry's more modern approach of speaking out. Within the palace walls, silence was both shield and sword, and in this moment, it became their most powerful weapon against Meghan. For King Charles, already navigating the fragile stability of a monarchy under constant pressure, Doria's words were both a vindication and a problem. From the very beginning, Charles had harbored doubts about Meghan. Her unconventional approach, her unwillingness to yield to tradition, and her constant tension with the press had made her a disruptive force. Privately, some senior royals had questioned the secrecy surrounding Meghan's pregnancies. But such questions had never been allowed to reach the surface. Decorum demanded that appearances be maintained. Doria's revelation cracked that decorum. For Charles, this was proof that his instincts had not been misguided. Yet as monarch, he knew the danger. If the public began to question the authenticity of royal heirs, even those outside the immediate line of succession, it could destabilize the monarchy itself. The royal family is built on image, lineage, and continuity. To suggest deception at the heart of that lineage was to invite chaos. Prince William's reaction was colder, more calculated. His relationship with Harry had already frayed to near breaking. The bond of brothers splintered under years of rivalry and public airing of grievances. To him, Doria's claim was less shocking than it was predictable. William had long believed that Harry's choices, marrying Meghan, leaving the family, attacking the institution, were reckless. In private, he may have seen this scandal as the natural outcome of a path he had warned Harry against. William's silence was not passive, it was judgment. By saying nothing, he allowed the scandal to consume Harry and Meghan without lifting a finger. Every headline that replayed Doria's words confirmed William's unspoken belief. Harry had chosen the wrong partner, and the consequences were now inescapable. Queen Camilla, ever the survivor of scandals herself, watched with a mixture of fascination and contempt. She had lived through years of being painted as the villain, the woman who broke up a royal marriage, the one who could never be fully embraced by the public. To see Meghan now endure a similar fall from grace may have been, in her eyes, a kind of poetic justice. Yet Camilla also understood the danger of scandal better than anyone. She knew that once a narrative takes hold, it is almost impossible to reverse. Meghan's pregnancies being labeled as staged could forever taint the monarchy's modern chapter. Still, her silence remained intact, perhaps with a touch of schadenfreude beneath the surface. Even Princess Anne, who has always valued duty and discretion above theatrics, could not ignore the implications. She had little patience for Meghan's dramatic approach to royal life and had voiced skepticism long before. For Anne, Doria's words confirmed what she had suspected, that Meghan was more actress than duchess, more performer than partner. To Anne, this was not a personal betrayal but a professional one. The monarchy depends on authenticity of duty, and if Meghan's role as mother was staged, it undermined the very seriousness of their institution. And silence was laced with disdain, her judgment firm but unspoken. Within the palace, courtiers and advisers were quick to seize upon the moment. For years, Meghan and Harry's accusations against the royal family, claims of racism, neglect, and cruelty, had left the palace scrambling to defend its image. Now, with Doria's claim, the tables had turned. For the first time, it was Meghan whose credibility was in tatters. Courtiers advised restraint, arguing that silence would allow Meghan to implode under the weight of her own family's betrayal. And so the palace did what it does best: nothing. The official silence became a loud echo in the press, a void that was filled with speculation and interpretation. Every day the palace remained quiet was a day that Meghan's image eroded further. The media, of course, read this silence as disapproval. Tabloids suggested that the royal family believed Doria. Commentators speculated that behind closed doors, senior royals were quietly relieved that the truth was finally out. The absence of defense for Meghan was interpreted as judgment, and that judgment hung heavy. In the past, when Kate faced criticism, the palace was quick to protect her. When William faced attacks, statements were issued in his defense. But when Meghan was accused of staging her pregnancy, no such protection came. The contrast was stark, and the message unmistakable: Meghan was on her own. For Harry, this silence was the loudest betrayal of all. His family, who had refused to defend him and Meghan against the press in the past, now refused to defend them against his mother-in-law's damning words. To him, the silence confirmed what he had always feared. The monarchy was willing to sacrifice him, his wife, and even his children to protect itself. The anger that had driven him from the palace reignited. But anger was not enough to counter the judgment that silence carried. What makes the royal family's silent judgment so devastating is that it leaves room for interpretation. Supporters of Meghan may argue that silence was meant to avoid fanning the flames. Critics argue that silence was confirmation of guilt. Either way, the silence became part of the story, feeding it, amplifying it, making it inescapable. The royal family, by saying nothing, allowed Meghan's scandal to define itself, to grow unchecked until it consumed every corner of public discourse. This silence also allowed the royals to rise above the scandal, at least in perception. By refusing to engage, they positioned themselves as dignified, untouched, while Meghan and Harry were dragged through the mud. The monarchy thrives on contrast, and in this moment, the contrast could not have been clearer. The royals in their stoic silence, Meghan and Harry in their frantic defense. For the institution, the silence was victory. For Meghan, it was annihilation. As Chapter 7 draws to a close, the picture is clear. The royal family's silence was not absence. It was judgment, a calculated decision that carried centuries of weight. It was a reminder of the monarchy's greatest weapon, endurance. While Meghan and Harry fought battles in the public eye, the royals stood still, watching, waiting, and allowing the tide of scandal to wash over their adversaries. And in that silence, Meghan found herself more isolated than ever before, her perfect image shattered, her allies gone, her mother turned, and the crown watching from a distance with cold, unspoken condemnation. Chapter 8 is the point where Doria Ragland's revelation stopped being just a family drama and transformed into a global spectacle. The media, always hungry for scandal, pounced on her words with the ferocity of wolves scenting blood. What had begun as whispers in online forums and speculative commentary in tabloids now exploded across front pages, television broadcasts, podcasts, and social media feeds. It was no longer simply about Meghan Markle's relationship with her mother. It was about the credibility of the Duchess of Sussex herself, the woman who had once captivated the world with her modern fairy tale. The media frenzy took hold quickly, reshaping the story into something larger than life, a saga that would dominate headlines for weeks and spark endless debates across every platform imaginable. The first stage of the frenzy was amplification. Within hours of Doria's words, the world's biggest outlets had picked up the story. From London to New York, from Sydney to Johannesburg, headlines screamed variations of the same shocking claim. Meghan's pregnancy had been staged. Major networks aired primetime segments dissecting what had been said, while online editions rushed out articles filled with speculation, background details, and quotes from royal commentators. Images of Meghan cradling her bump during public appearances were republished en masse, suddenly reinterpreted through the lens of suspicion. Every gesture that once seemed tender now looked, to some, like performance. Every carefully curated photograph became evidence in a trial conducted not in courts, but in the court of public opinion. The second stage was analysis. The frenzy needed fuel, and experts of all kinds lined up to provide it. Obstetricians were invited onto morning shows to explain the physics of pregnancy bumps, how fabric folds could create illusions, and whether a bump could really appear to collapse when someone bent forward. Psychologists weighed in, speculating about the mental strain of staging a pregnancy, what it said about identity, and how it would affect a family dynamic. Royal historians were dusted off and interviewed about precedent, comparing Meghan's situation to other scandals that had rocked the monarchy in centuries past. Every perspective was given airtime, and every perspective deepened the spectacle. Even those who defended Meghan inadvertently kept the story alive by insisting on her innocence. The third stage was reinterpretation. The frenzy sent journalists and commentators diving back into the archives. Footage of Meghan and Harry's interview with Oprah was replayed, with commentators asking why Meghan had not addressed the rumors then. The Netflix docuseries was revisited, with critics pointing out that the couple had insisted on telling their truth, but had conveniently avoided the one truth now exposed by Meghan's own mother. Even Harry's memoir came under scrutiny. Passages about fatherhood, about protecting his family, about the birth of his children were reread with skepticism. Was Harry, too, part of the act? Had he been complicit, or was he simply deceived? The reinterpretation extended beyond Meghan into every corner of their brand, raising doubts not just about her pregnancies, but about every story they had ever told. The fourth stage was spectacle. Talk shows, late-night comedians, and satirical programs found endless material in the scandal. Some mocked Meghan as an actress who could not stop performing even off-screen. Others framed the situation as tragic, a mother betrayed by her own mother. The memes flooded social media. Hashtags trended for days. with users posting side-by-side photos of Meghan's bump and dissecting them like amateur detectives. Twitter threads speculated about surrogacy, prosthetics, and palace cover-ups. TikTok users made viral videos replaying the infamous clip of Meghan bending over, slowing it down frame by frame as if uncovering a hidden truth. The frenzy fed itself, growing larger with every click, every share, every headline. Yet beneath the laughter and mockery was a darker undercurrent. The frenzy exposed society's obsession with controlling women's bodies, with doubting women's stories, with reducing motherhood to performance. For Meghan, already a polarizing figure, this undercurrent was particularly vicious. To her critics, the revelation confirmed everything they had ever believed, that she was manipulative, deceptive, and obsessed with image. To her supporters, the frenzy was proof of the world's cruelty, its willingness to tear down a woman who dared to defy tradition. But for the media, these divisions were gold. Outrage and defense, attack and counterattack, all of it drove clicks, views, and ratings. The frenzy also crossed into politics and culture. Commentators framed the scandal as symbolic of a deeper battle between modernity and tradition, authenticity and performance, truth and image. Meghan became a symbol, either of liberation or deception, depending on the lens through which she was viewed. Politicians weighed in, some subtly criticizing her for undermining the monarchy, others defending her right to privacy. Celebrities were asked for their opinions in interviews, their soundbites plastered across headlines. The frenzy was no longer just about Meghan. It had become a cultural touchpoint, a story that reflected larger debates about truth in the modern world. For Meghan and Harry, the media frenzy was suffocating. Every attempt to respond was drowned out by the sheer volume of speculation. Their carefully managed statements sounded small against the roar of headlines. Their silence, at times, only added to the feeding frenzy, interpreted as guilt or panic. Every time they stepped out in public, cameras captured their expressions, reading meaning into every smile, every frown, every sideways glance. For them, life became a stage without an exit, every move scrutinized and reinterpreted by an audience that could not be satisfied. The royal family, meanwhile, benefited quietly from the frenzy. Their silence looked dignified compared to Meghan and Harry's desperation. Every headline about staged pregnancies was a headline not about palace scandals, not about Charles's challenges, not about William and Kate's pressures. The monarchy understood the media cycle better than anyone. By refusing to feed it, they allowed Meghan to remain the central character in the drama. And as long as Meghan was the story, the monarchy was safe. But the frenzy had consequences beyond the headlines. It sowed seeds of doubt that could never be uprooted. Even if Meghan produced evidence, even if Doria retracted her claim, even if every expert in the world defended her, the suspicion would linger. Once the media frenzy takes hold, the story becomes larger than the facts. It becomes myth, memory, a cultural reference point. People will remember the suspicion long after they forget the details. For Meghan, that was the most devastating consequence of all. As Chapter 8 ends, the audience sees the full force of the media frenzy. It is relentless, merciless, and inescapable. Doria's words have been amplified into a global scandal, Meghan's image dissected to the bone, Harry dragged into the storm, and the monarchy quietly strengthened by contrast. The frenzy has turned a mother's revelation into a cultural earthquake, one that cannot be undone. The storm is no longer just circling Meghan. It has consumed her completely.